The moment I saw that fake security guard pointing his gun at my 19-year-old daughter on our own front lawn, I knew Karen's HOA power trip had gone too far. What he didn't know was that my daughter Emily wasn't just home from college. She was home from FBI training, and her entire tactical unit was having dinner in our backyard. Before we start the story, please comment down from which country are you watching and don't forget to subscribe. I need to take you back to the beginning. 6 months ago, my wife Lisa and I were thrilled about our move to Oakwood Heights. After 20 years in our cramped downtown apartment, we'd finally saved enough for a proper house with a yard. The neighborhood looked picture-perfect, tidy lawns, kids playing, and friendly waves from porches. My daughter Emily was starting her first year of FBI training, following in her uncle's footsteps, and we wanted a place she'd be proud to come home to during breaks. "This is it," Lisa whispered during our first drive through the neighborhood. "This is where we'll finally have peace." The moving truck had barely pulled away when I noticed a woman marching toward our house, clipboard in hand and lips pressed into a thin line. She looked like she was on a mission, her heels clicking against the sidewalk with military precision. "You can't park your car there," she announced without introducing herself. "It's against community guidelines." "I'm sorry?" I replied, confused. "We just moved in. I'm David and this is my wife Lisa." She ignored our attempt at friendliness. "I'm Karen Mitchell, president of the Oakwood Heights HOA. Your moving boxes need to be disposed of by 6 p.m., and that bush needs to be trimmed." She thrust a thick binder of papers at me. "Here are our community standards. Violations start at $50. As she walked away, Lisa and I exchanged puzzled looks. We'd been told the neighborhood had a relaxed HOA that mainly handled communal garden maintenance. "Well, that was intense," Lisa sighed. "Let's just follow the rules for now. We don't need trouble on day one." So we did exactly that. We broke down the boxes, trimmed the bush, and moved our car. But it wasn't enough. By our second week, bright orange violation notices appeared on our door almost daily. $75 fine for unapproved mailbox color. $100 for excessive lawn ornaments, we had one garden gnome. $150 for unauthorized gathering, we'd invited 2 neighbors for coffee. When I tried to pay the first fine, I realized something odd. The payment address was Karen's personal P.O. box, not a business account. The checks were to be made out to Community Preservation Fund. Something didn't feel right. Our neighbor Tom, a retired postal worker who'd lived in Oakwood Heights for 30 years, confirmed my suspicions when I bumped into him while walking our dog. "The HOA?" he whispered, glancing around nervously. "It dissolved years ago after the previous board moved away. Karen just took over. Nobody had the energy to fight her." "So these fines aren't legitimate?" I asked, stunned. Tom shook his head. "Most of us just pay to avoid the harassment. She once called my boss when I refused a fine, claimed I was destroying neighborhood property values with my Christmas decorations. Nearly cost me my job." "That's extortion," I said, anger rising in my chest. "It gets worse," Tom muttered. "Last year she hired some guy to play security officer. Walks around with a uniform and everything. Some people say he carries a gun." That night, I explained everything to Lisa. Her legal background kicked in immediately. "This is fraud, plain and simple," she said, eyes flashing with determination. "We need evidence, records of payments, testimony from neighbors, proof that the HOA doesn't legally exist." Over the next few weeks, we quietly began collecting information. We discovered that Karen had been running her scheme for nearly 7 years, collecting thousands in fake fines each month. The elderly residents were her primary targets. They were less likely to question authority or research the legitimacy of the HOA. Mrs. Jenkins, an 82-year-old widow down the street, admitted tearfully that she'd paid over $3,000 in violations during the past year alone, money she could barely afford on her fixed income. "She threatened to put a lien on my house," Mrs. Jenkins explained. "I was afraid I'd lose my home." The more stories we heard, the angrier we became. This wasn't just about power or control. Karen was financially draining vulnerable people in our community. Our first real confrontation came when I refused to pay a $200 fine for unauthorized landscaping. Karen appeared at our door that evening with a stern-looking man in a security uniform. "This is Officer Reynolds," she introduced him, though he wore no name tag or badge number. "He's here to discuss your refusal to comply with community standards." The man stood with his hand resting on his hip, right where a gun would be holstered. The intimidation tactic was obvious. "I'd like to see the HOA's legal registration and bylaws," I said calmly. "And Officer Reynolds' credentials." Karen's face flushed red. The documents are confidential. And you don't have the authority to question our security personnel. Actually, if he's carrying a weapon on private property and claiming any kind of law enforcement status, I absolutely do have that right, I replied, silently thanking Lisa for briefing me on the relevant laws. They left in a huff, but I knew we'd just escalated the situation. That night, we installed security cameras around our property, a decision that would later prove crucial. Over the next month, we continued gathering evidence. Lisa created a secure online group for neighbors to share their experiences anonymously, and the stories poured in. We discovered that Officer Reynolds was actually Kevin Reynolds, Karen's cousin who'd been rejected from 3 different police academies. He had no security license, no weapons permit, and no legal authority. The most disturbing discovery came when Emily's FBI mentor helped us access public records. The real Oakwood Heights HOA had indeed been dissolved 7 years ago. Karen had been operating a complete fiction, using intimidation and fake documents to extract money from our community. We were getting ready to take our evidence to the police when Karen made her biggest mistake. Emily was coming home for the weekend and bringing 5 classmates from her FBI training unit. They'd been working on a community policing project, and Emily thought our neighborhood situation might make an interesting case study. We planned a backyard barbecue to welcome them. Saturday arrived with perfect weather. Emily and her friends, all in their casual clothes but carrying themselves with that unmistakable law enforcement posture, arrived around noon. They were an impressive group: Zach, a former Marine; Taylor, who had a law degree; Marcus, a computer forensics specialist; Kayla, who specialized in negotiation tactics; and James, who'd previously worked in white-collar crime investigation. The afternoon was going wonderfully. For the first time since moving in, we felt relaxed and happy in our new home. Emily was setting up her laptop to show her friends the evidence we'd collected when I heard raised voices from the front yard. I stepped around the house to find Officer Reynolds standing at our front gate, issuing a violation notice to Emily, who had come out to grab something from her car. "This gathering exceeds the permitted number of guests," he was saying, scribbling on his clipboard. "And that vehicle is parked incorrectly." Emily, always level-headed, responded calmly. "This is my parents' home. I'm just visiting." "The rules apply to everyone," Reynolds insisted, puffing out his chest. "That'll be $250, due immediately." "I'd like to see your authority to issue this fine," Emily replied, her FBI training evident in her composure. That's when everything escalated. Reynolds' face darkened, and in one fluid motion, he unholstered his weapon and pointed it directly at my daughter. "My authority is this," he growled. "Now get your checkbook or things will get unpleasant." Time seemed to freeze. My daughter was staring down the barrel of a gun on our own front lawn over a completely fabricated violation. My heart hammered in my chest as I stepped forward, but before I could speak, the backyard gate swung open. "Federal agents," Zach's voice rang out clearly as he and the other FBI trainees emerged, moving with practiced precision. "Lower your weapon immediately." The change in Reynolds' expression would have been comical under different circumstances. His face drained of color as he registered the 5 new arrivals, all standing in perfect formation, their training evident in every movement. "You're making a big mistake," he stammered, though his hand wavered. "The mistake," Taylor said firmly, "is impersonating security personnel and drawing a weapon without cause or proper licensing." Reynolds panicked. He tried to reholster his gun, fumbling it in his haste. Zach moved forward in one swift motion, securing the weapon while Marcus guided Reynolds to the ground. "You can't do this," Reynolds shouted. "I'm authorized security." "Authorized by whom?" James asked, his voice calm but authoritative. "Because we've checked with state licensing boards. You don't exist in their system." The commotion drew neighbors from their homes. They gathered at a safe distance, watching in disbelief as the man who had terrorized them for years sat handcuffed on our front lawn. Just as local police arrived, called by Kayla, Karen's SUV screeched to a halt at the curb. She burst out, face contorted with rage. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. "Release my officer immediately." Emily stepped forward, her FBI badge in hand. Though still in training, her authority in that moment was undeniable. "Karen Mitchell, your security officer just drew an unlicensed weapon on private property while attempting to extort money through fraudulent means," she stated. "The police have questions for both of you." Karen's face went through a remarkable transformation, from rage to disbelief to fear in the span of seconds. "This is all a misunderstanding," she stammered. "Our HOA has rules." "Your HOA doesn't exist," Lisa interjected, holding up the official dissolution papers we'd obtained. It was legally disbanded 7 years ago. You've been operating a fraudulent organization and extorting money from residents. The next few hours were chaotic. Police took statements from us and several neighbors who suddenly found their courage. Reynolds was arrested for unlawful possession of a firearm, impersonating security personnel, and assault with a deadly weapon. Karen was taken in for questioning regarding the fraudulent HOA operation. As word spread throughout the neighborhood, people began appearing with folders of violation notices, receipts for fines paid, and stories of intimidation. The officers' patrol cars weren't equipped to handle the mountain of evidence being offered. "We'll need everyone to file formal statements," the lead officer explained, looking overwhelmed. "This case is bigger than we initially thought." Mrs. Jenkins approached me, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I've been afraid for so long." By Sunday evening, the news had picked up the story. Fake HOA scam exposed in Oakwood Heights ran across the bottom of our local station. Karen's operation had apparently extended beyond our neighborhood. She'd been running similar schemes in 2 other communities using different names. The legal proceedings took months, but the outcomes were worth waiting for. Reynolds pleaded guilty to multiple charges and received a 5-year sentence. Karen faced even more serious consequences: fraud, extortion, conspiracy, and operating a criminal enterprise. The judge showed no mercy, sentencing her to 12 years and ordering full restitution to all victims. "The court views these crimes as particularly heinous," the judge stated during sentencing. "You deliberately targeted vulnerable community members, exploited their trust in local governance, and created a climate of fear for personal gain." The FBI became officially involved when the scale of the operation was revealed. Emily's training unit received commendations for their role in breaking the case, though they insisted they were just in the right place at the right time. For our neighborhood, the healing process began with a genuine community meeting in the local park. Over 100 residents gathered to discuss how to move forward. "We need a real HOA," Tom suggested. "One with elected officers, transparent finances, and reasonable rules that actually benefit the community." People nodded in agreement. After years of Karen's oppression, there was hunger for legitimate structure and community involvement. Lisa volunteered her legal expertise to help draft proper bylaws, and several other neighbors with relevant skills stepped forward. For the first time, Oakwood Heights felt like a true community united by shared purpose rather than shared fear. 1 year later, our neighborhood is unrecognizable, not in its appearance but in its spirit. The properly established HOA meets monthly, with rotating leadership and full financial transparency. The minimal fees go toward actual community improvements: a playground renovation, seasonal flower plantings, and an emergency fund for neighbors in need. Mrs. Jenkins chairs the social committee, organizing block parties and welcome baskets for new residents. Tom headed up our first neighborhood watch program, a real one focused on community safety rather than punitive enforcement. Emily graduated from her FBI training program with honors. Her experience in Oakwood Heights had given her unique insight into community policing and white-collar crime that distinguished her from her peers. She visits often, always greeted warmly by neighbors who consider her a hero. As for Lisa and me, we finally have the peaceful home we dreamed of. Our garden gnome has been joined by several friends, our mailbox remains blissfully non-standardized, and we host gatherings without fear of clipboards or fines. Sometimes I think about that moment when Reynolds drew his gun, how one act of desperate intimidation brought down years of systematic abuse. It was terrifying, but it was also the catalyst our community needed. Last week, a new family moved in across the street. I watched from our porch as neighbors appeared one by one, bearing casseroles and friendly smiles rather than rulebooks and fake citations. When the moving truck departed, we all gathered for an impromptu welcome party on their front lawn, the kind of gathering that would have incurred a $500 fine in Karen's day. As the sun set over our liberated neighborhood, I raised my glass in a toast to Oakwood Heights, where we don't just live beside each other, we stand up for each other. The cheer that followed was the sweetest sound I'd heard since moving here, the sound of a community that had faced down a tyrant and reclaimed its soul. Sometimes the most valuable freedom is the one you have to fight for. And sometimes, just when a bully thinks they've won, they discover they've picked the wrong family to threaten, especially when that family includes an FBI daughter with backup.